When a rich boy tore her shirt in front of the entire class, he thought he'd humiliated her. He had no idea he'd just awakened a storm 5 years in the making. At 23, Danielle Brooks had hoped Westgate High would be a fresh start. A temporary teaching job, quiet halls, a chance to inspire. But instead she became a target. Her thrift store blouses, soft-spoken tone, and kind demeanor made her an easy mark. Especially for Tyler Granger, the arrogant son of the school board's most powerful member. For 6 weeks, Danielle endured his taunts. He called her scared cat, questioned her credentials, spilled coffee near her belongings, and made her classroom a stage for his cruelty. And then came October 15th. She was writing turning points in American history on the board when Tyler walked up and ripped her shirt down the back in front of 32 students. The laughter was instant. Cameras everywhere. Danielle didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply turned around slowly, holding the torn fabric to her chest, and whispering 5 words that made the room fall silent. "You just made a mistake." What no one knew was that Danielle had once been a national judo champion, trained by her Marine father. She'd sworn off the sport after an incident that left an opponent hospitalized. But now, standing in that sunlit classroom in Denver, something old and powerful stirred inside her. Not anger, not revenge, but resolve. And for the first time in years, Danielle Brooks stopped apologizing for her strength. Danielle stood tall in the silence, her back stinging from the cold air and humiliation, yet her expression unshaken. 32 students, some still holding up their phones, watched with wide eyes. But they weren't seeing the same Danielle anymore. Gone was the timid woman in hand-me-down clothes. In her place stood someone ancient, calm, and deliberate. The kind of strength you don't boast about, the kind you carry like a quiet oath. "Skylar," Danielle said softly, locking eyes with the quiet girl in the back, half hidden behind dark hair. "Can you go to my car, please? There's a gray gym bag in the back seat. Honda Civic. Keys are in my desk drawer." There was a pause. Then Skylar, caught off guard by the request, nodded and slipped out of the room. Tyler let out a cruel laugh. "What you gonna change into your Walmart workout clothes? Gonna cry in the parking lot, Miss Substitute." Danielle didn't blink. "Sit down, Tyler." His smirk faded. "Excuse me. You don't give me orders. Do you know who my father is?" "Yes," she replied calmly. "I also know you're terrified and angry, and you're about to make your second biggest mistake today." Tyler's jaw clenched. "What's the first?" "Tearing my shirt." Just then Skylar returned, carrying the gray bag. Danielle didn't even look away from Tyler as she accepted it. "To the rest of the class," she said, raising her voice, "please head to the library and tell Mrs. Conway will be with you shortly." No one moved, unless she added, "You want to be part of what happens next." They bolted. Danielle opened her bag, and from within it pulled out a folded white uniform, her old judo giant, a black belt worn soft from years of use. As she slipped it on with quiet ceremony, Tyler's grin faded completely. This wasn't a costume, it was armor, and Danielle Brooks was done being afraid. As Danielle tightened the black belt around her waist, hands, steady voice. Silent. Tyler Granger's smug expression wavered. Something primal shifted in the room. Even though it was just the two of them now, the tension hung heavy like smoke before a fire. "You've lost it," Tyler scoffed, but his voice lacked its usual bite. "This is assault. Ill have you fired." Danielle met his gaze without blinking. "I'm not going to touch you, Tyler," she said softly. "But I know you're going to touch me, just like you've done for 6 weeks. Only this time physics will answer you." There was something in her tone, a quiet finality, that made Tyler take a half-step back before pride reeled him in. "I own this school," he growled. "I own you." But before he could storm out, Danielle spoke again, her voice calm as a slow tide. "Skylar Martinez has been recording your abuse. Not just mine. 2 years' worth. Mr. Rodriguez, Miss Chen. All of it. Every insult, every attack, every cover-up." Tyler froze. She sent the entire file to your mother this morning." Danielle added, her voice laced with conviction. "And to the district superintendent. And the police." That's when the classroom door flew open. Victoria Granger. Tyler's mother stood in the doorway like judgment itself, her polished heels clicking across the floor. "Is it true?" she demanded, holding her phone up. On the screen was the footage, Tyler grinning as he tore Danielle's shirt, the stunned class behind him, the smirk he wore like a crown. Tyler stammered, "Mom, this isn't what it looks like." Victoria cut him off. "It's exactly what it looks like, and it ends now." Moments later, Principal Carlisle burst into the room, face red and voice trembling. "Miss Brooks, what in God's name, why are you dressed like that? This is not protocol." "This," Danielle replied, "evenly is who I am, and who I had to become because silence didn't protect me, or anyone else." Then Skylar stepped forward from the hallway, phone in hand. "Would you like to see the rest of the evidence, Principal Carlisle?" she asked. "Or the list of emails teachers sent you that you ignored?" And just like that, the power shifted. The boy who thought he was untouchable stood speechless. The principal who enabled him looked ready to collapse. And the substitute they thought was weak stood at the center not as prey, but as protector. Because Danielle Brooks had stopped surviving. She was ready to fight. Tyler's eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to save him. But there was no audience left to cheer him on, no shield of privilege thick enough to hide behind. His mother stood still, cold fury etched into her designer features. Principal Carlisle was already sweating, trying to defend the indefensible. And Danielle Brooks, standing calmly in her judo gi, radiated a kind of unshakable resolve that couldn't be bought, threatened, or silenced. "You're all making a huge mistake," Tyler snapped, though his voice cracked. "She threatened me. She's not stable. This whole thing is a setup." "Enough," Victoria Granger said sharply. "I watched the footage, Tyler. All of it. Your words, your actions, your laughter. You didn't just humiliate your teachers, you made them suffer. And your father, he paid to make it go away." She turned to Carlisle. $50,000 per incident, deposited directly into your private education fund after every complaint. "I have the statements. I have the—" Carlisle stammered. That's taken out of context." "No," she interrupted, her voice slicing the air like glass. "You're done here." At that moment, security officers arrived, retired cops who looked more confused than ready to act. But Victoria addressed them with cool precision. "Gentlemen, please document everything. I'm formally reporting corruption, bribery, and a consistent failure to protect school staff from student abuse." One of the guards nodded, stepping forward to collect statements. The other glanced down at Tyler, who stood, rigid fists clenched at his sides. And then he snapped. Without warning, Tyler lunged across the room, rage and humiliation driving him past his mother, past security, straight at Danielle. "This is all your fault," he screamed. "You think you can ruin me?" Time slowed. Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She moved like water, finding its shape. With decades of training surging through every muscle she stepped inside, Tyler's attack hooked her hip beneath his center of gravity and threw him. The classroom echoed with the thud of his body hitting the floor. Phones recorded. Witnesses gasped. Security stepped forward but stopped short, stunned. Danielle stood over Tyler, who now lay gasping for breath, eyes wide, staring up at the ceiling like it had answers. Her stance was poised but peaceful. That she said quietly was self-defense. Coach Barnes, who had just entered the doorway, nodded in approval. "And textbook judo," he added. That was poetry in motion. Because in that moment, Danielle Brooks didn't just protect herself. She changed everything. The aftermath was swift and seismic. Tyler lay crumpled on the floor. The air knocked clean out of his lungs, not by Danielle's strength, but by physics and truth. One of the security officers helped him sit up, while the other confirmed with a nod that the entire throw had been captured on school surveillance. Principal Carlisle, still clinging to the last threads of control, tried one final gambit. "This is skill assault. You can't throw a student across the room." Coach Barnes stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of both authority and history. "No, Carl. That was controlled force, not aggression. That was a judo hip throw ogoshi, legal, measured, and absolutely necessary." Danielle's face remained composed, but her eyes flicked to the plaque above the whiteboard, the one that read, "Integrity, Safety, Excellence." For the first time, it didn't feel like a lie. The room shifted again when Skylar Martinez stepped in front of the security guard and quietly offered her phone. "There are 67 videos," she said, "covering 2 years of abuse, 14 staff members, 3 mental health breakdowns, 1 attempted resignation that was blocked by this man right here." She nodded toward Carlisle. Gasps filled the room, not just from staff, but from the handful of parents who had begun to gather outside the classroom after hearing the commotion. And then Victoria Granger, once the iron shield for her son's behavior, delivered the final blow. She turned to Danielle. "Miss Brooks, I want to apologize, not just for my son, but for every adult who failed to protect you and your colleagues. You will have my full legal and financial support moving forward." Danielle blinked, surprised. Why? Victoria looked at her son, still gasping on the floor, and said, "Because it's time I stopped protecting a boy who thinks consequences are optional and started protecting the people he hurt." The security team escorted Tyler from the room, while Carlisle, pale and defeated, quietly gathered his things. And then the bell rang. Students flooded the hallway, but something had changed. Instead of laughter or whispers, the kids who returned to room 108 stood taller, quieter, humbled. Madison James, the same girl who once laughed the loudest, approached Danielle slowly. Sorry, Miss Brooks," she said, "for watching, for not saying anything, for being too scared." Danielle nodded gently. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. Staying silent does." The students looked at her with something new in their eyes. Not fear, not pity. Respect. The next week, room 108 was transformed. Gone were the whispers, the sideways glances, the fear that used to hang in the air like humidity. In their place, a quiet reverence. Students walked in and took their seats not because they feared punishment, but because they now understood what Danielle Brooks stood for. That Monday morning, Danielle found a brown package on her desk. No note. Just a simple box tied with twine. Inside was a brand new deep navy blouse. Nothing flashy, but sturdy, dignified. Folded beneath it was a stack of papers, handwritten, and typed 32 essays titled, "What Miss Brooks Taught Me." She sat in silence as she read them one by one. "Madison said I learned it's never too late to speak up even if you were once part of the problem. Logan admitted I knew what Tyler was doing, and I looked away. I'm ashamed, but I won't look away again." Even the quietest students, the ones Danielle thought barely noticed her, wrote full pages. One wrote, "I feel safe here now," while another confessed, "I always thought standing up meant shouting. But you showed us strength doesn't have to be loud." Danielle couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Not the quiet tears of exhaustion she'd cried in private. These were different. These were tears of recognition, of being seen, of finally understanding that her fight hadn't been in vain. She framed the torn shirt, the one Tyler had ripped in front of the class, and mounted it near her desk. Beneath it, she placed a plaque that read, "Sometimes standing up means knowing when to throw someone down. D. Brooks." New students would ask about it, and Danielle would tell them the story, not with pride or vengeance, but with purpose. About the time she stopped being scared, about the day she stopped apologizing for her strength, about how a single moment of courage can realign an entire system. Because Danielle Brooks hadn't just defended herself. She had redefined what a teacher could be. Years passed, but Danielle Brooks' story didn't fade, it multiplied. Her framed shirt became more than a memory. It became a symbol. Teachers from other schools came to visit room 108. Students pointed to it with awe, and whenever someone asked what it meant, Danielle would say, That's the day this classroom became a place of truth. But her influence didn't stop within four walls. Skylar Martinez, once the quiet girl in the back row, went on to win a scholarship to NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Her senior documentary, Invisible Wounds: Bullying in Americas Elite Schools, featured real footage from Westgate High, anonymized but undeniable. It swept 3 national film festivals and started a national conversation on educator safety and institutional silence. Victoria Granger followed through on her promise. She divorced her husband and used part of her settlement to found the Granger Initiative, a non-profit dedicated to combating school corruption and protecting teachers. Danielle was one of its founding advisors. Coach Barnes launched a self-defense program for school staff. Guess who taught the judo classes? Danielle, of course. Only now she didn't wear her gi to hide. She wore it like a badge, a reminder of the strength she nearly abandoned and was now using to uplift others. As for Tyler, he was expelled, faced disciplinary hearings, and spent a year in court-mandated community service at a public high school, the kind he once mocked. Last anyone heard, he was studying social work. At her wedding years later, Skylar, now a confident young woman in a navy bridesmaid dress, gave a toast that would go viral. "Danielle Brooks didn't save me by pulling me from a fire," she said, voice steady. "She saved me by showing me I was worth defending. Before her, I thought strength meant being loud. But she showed me real strength is knowing when to act and when to stand firm. She didn't just stop a bully. She taught all of us what it means to never be silent again." The crowd stood in applause. Danielle's father wiped a tear and whispered, "That's my girl." And across the country, thousands of people, students, teachers, even strangers, heard that speech and remembered one thing. Sometimes the strongest voice in the room belongs to the one who was quiet for too long. Even years later, Danielle Brooks never let the spotlight change who she was. She still arrived at school early, still packed her own lunch, still called every student by name. But something had shifted, not just in her, but in the way the world saw her. Former students would stop her at the grocery store or at the gym. Some hugged her. Others simply said, "Thank you." And every time Danielle would smile and reply, "Just keep standing up for yourself and for others." Her classroom, now officially renamed the Brooks Learning Center, became a sanctuary, not just for knowledge, but for courage. That tattered blouse remained on the wall untouched, and next to it, a growing collage of thank you notes, student essays, and newspaper clippings that told the story of a woman who once stood in silence and then chose to rise. Because Danielle didn't just change a school, she sparked a movement. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the loudest, but the one who's quietly been holding back a storm. Strength isn't always about fighting, it's about knowing when to fight. And when you do fight, not with anger, but with purpose. Never be ashamed of your strength. Never apologize for defending what's right. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you know someone like Danielle Brooks? Or maybe you are her. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of courage, justice, and truth.